I want to tell you something that I've been thinking about for a long time. Not because it's a famous story, not because anyone made a broadcast about it, not because the Galactic Council issued a statement or some war correspondent turned it into a documentary. I want to tell you because I was there. I was standing maybe 12 feet away when it happened, and I've been carrying it around in my chest ever since, like a stone that won't dissolve, warm in a way stones aren't supposed to be warm. Her name was Sergeant Mara Voss. And the thing she did that day, it wasn't dramatic, not in the way you'd expect drama to look. There were no explosions, no one died, no ship went down in flames over a planet's atmosphere. What happened was quieter than that. And somehow that made it worse for him, the soldier who laughed at her, because quiet things have a way of echoing longer. Let me take you back to Praxis Station. Praxis Station was not a beautiful place. I don't know who designed it, probably some Varun architect who thought function was the only thing that mattered, because there wasn't a single soft edge anywhere in the whole structure. Everything was angular, brutalist, if you want a word for it. The corridors were wide enough for the Kethoran soldiers to walk four abreast with their shoulder plating extended, which told you something about who the station had been built for. The walls were a dull gray-green, the kind of color that doesn't quite settle on anything. In certain lighting, and the lighting on Praxis was always shifting, always cycling through frequencies that the Kethoran preferred, those walls looked almost alive, like the inside of something biological, like you were in the ribcage of a very large, very cold creature. The station hung at the junction of three contested territories. That's the simple way to say it. The complicated way to say it involves about 40 years of galactic compact negotiations, 3 broken ceasefires, and a resource dispute over something called Verite ore that I still don't fully understand. What I understood was this. The Kethoran were the dominant military presence on Praxis. The humans were there under a cooperation clause, and the cooperation was going about as well as you'd expect when one species thinks they're doing the other a favor just by tolerating their presence. I was there as a communications adjunct, technical staff, not military, not exactly civilian, one of those awkward in-between roles that exists because someone at the Compact figured out that pure military communication between species was producing too many misunderstandings, and that sometimes you needed a human in the room who could translate not just the language but the temperature of a conversation. I was good at reading temperature. That morning the temperature was cold. The briefing hall on level 4 was designed for Kethoran occupancy. The seats were angled wrong for human spines. The ceiling was too high. Something about Kethoran biology made them uncomfortable in low-ceilinged spaces, some ancestral reflex from whatever open-sky world they'd evolved on, and so the room always felt cavernous, echoey, like words got lost in the air between your mouth and whoever you were talking to. There were maybe 30 people in the room that morning. 22 of them were Kethoran soldiers and officers. The rest of us were human, 4 military, 2 technical staff including me, and a compact liaison officer named Breda who never seemed to eat but always smelled like something was burning. The meeting was supposed to be a joint patrol assignment briefing. Routine. Sector 7-9 had been showing some irregular readings on the deep range sensors, and the Kethoran commander had decided that a joint patrol, humans and Kethoran together, was the appropriate response. The kind of thing that looked good in reports. See how we cooperate. See how well it's working. Sergeant Mara Voss was one of the 4 human military personnel. I noticed her before the meeting started, the way you sometimes notice a person not because they're loud or flashy, but because they have a quality of stillness that draws the eye. She was standing near the far wall, helmet tucked under one arm, reviewing something on a small handheld. She was compact, not tall, not imposing in any physical sense. Brown hair pulled back tight. Dark eyes that moved quickly over whatever she was reading. There was nothing performative about her. She wasn't trying to look a certain way. She was just there, present, doing the thing she was doing. The Kethoran, by contrast, were very much aware of how they looked. I should describe them, because otherwise the story doesn't make sense the way it needs to make sense. The Kethoran are tall. The shortest one in that room was 8 feet. Their bodies are built like an engineering decision, everything deliberately placed, nothing wasted. 4 limbs for movement, 2 secondary manipulator arms folded at the torso when not in use. The exoskeletal plating along their backs and shoulders is natural, not armor grown from their own biology, and it refracts light in a way that makes them seem to shift color as they move. In the station's cycling light, they went from a deep blue-black to something closer to green, and back again. Their faces were angular, hard-planed, with compound eyes that could track 2 independent focal points simultaneously. They communicated in their own language partly through sound, and partly through the controlled pressure patterns along those shoulder plates. They were, objectively speaking, physically extraordinary. And they knew it. More specifically, the one I need to tell you about knew it. His designation in the common tongue was Commander HFY, high rank. Senior Patrol Officer. The kind of authority that doesn't need to announce itself because it's visible in the way everyone else in the room keeps half their attention on it at all times. HFY had been stationed on Praxis for 14 cycles, which by human years was somewhere around 8 years. He spoke the human common tongue fluently, and he used that fluency not as a bridge but as a blade, precise, calibrated, always controlled. He was the kind of speaker who never stumbled on a word, and that fact alone was unsettling in a subtle way, because stumbling on words is a very human thing, and the absence of it in a non-human made you aware of the gap. He did not think well of humans. That was not a guess. That was something I had documented over 6 months of temperature reading. The briefing started. HFY was at the front, and he laid out the patrol parameters in a way that was efficient and also slightly degrading, not overtly, not in any way you could point to and file a complaint about, but in the small structural choices. The Kethoran routes were described first, in detail, with full tactical reasoning. The human component of the patrol was described in a single sentence, the way you might describe where to put something you're not sure you need. The human unit will take the eastern approach corridor and maintain observation position at marker 7. That was it, observation position. Not tactical position, not engagement position, observation. I saw the 4 human soldiers absorb this without visible reaction, which told me they were professional, and also that this wasn't the first time. Then HFY opened the floor for questions. Sergeant Voss raised her hand. HFY looked at her. His compound eyes moved in that particular way they moved when a Kethoran was processing something they found mildly irritating, a kind of slow-tracking shift. The human, he said, not her rank, not her name, the human, a designation, not a title. Mara Voss did not blink at this. She said, Commander, the eastern approach corridor runs adjacent to the Verite processing conduit on level 3. The sensor readings that flagged this patrol were consistent with harmonic interference from a damaged conduit section. I reviewed the station maintenance logs this morning. If that's the source, repositioning the patrol to include direct access to the conduit maintenance port would let us resolve the issue in one pass rather than 2 separate deployments. She said it the way you say something obvious, not challenging, just factual, like she was sharing information she assumed would be welcomed. There was a pause. In that pause, something moved across HFY's shoulder plates. A ripple, fast and controlled. Among the Kethoran present, I saw a few of them catch it, recognize it. Then HFY made a sound. It was laughter, not human laughter, not a ha-ha, not anything warm. The Kethoran expression of amusement is a low, resonant pulse that comes from somewhere in the chest cavity, and it's not a comfortable sound to be on the receiving end of, because it carries a particular harmonic frequency that the human nervous system registers instinctively as a warning, threat adjacent, like thunder a few miles off. He let it run for maybe 3 seconds. Then he said in that perfect, controlled common tongue, "You reviewed the maintenance logs." Not a question, a reiteration, like you might repeat a child's reasoning back to them. "Yes, sir," Mara said. "And on the basis of reviewing logs," HFY said, "you are recommending a modification to a patrol strategy developed by Kethoran intelligence analysts with 14 cycles of experience in this sector." "I'm offering an observation," she said. "You can do with it what you think is best." Another pause, another ripple across the shoulder plates. "What is your name, human?" "Sergeant Mara Voss." "Sergeant Voss," he said, and there was something in the way he put sergeant in front of the name, like he was humoring a label that didn't quite apply. "The Eastern Approach Corridor assignment stands. Observation Post Marker 7. That will be sufficient for your capabilities." "Your capabilities." I watched her face. Nothing moved, not a muscle. Not a tightening around the eyes, not a press of the lips. She just nodded once, said understood, and that was that. The briefing continued. HFY moved on. But I noticed that Breda, the liaison officer, had written something on her datapad and was holding it very still in her lap, like she didn't want to be seen doing anything with her hands. I noticed that 2 of the other Kethoran in the room had exchanged a very quick glance, the kind that travels between people who share an opinion about what they just witnessed. And I noticed that Sergeant Voss, when she went back to her handheld after the briefing opened up again, had already pulled up a new set of files. She was reading the station's full structural schematics. I don't know why I noticed that specifically. I think because it was such a quiet, determined thing to do right after someone laughed at you, not brooding, not plotting exactly, just continuing to work, continuing to understand the environment she was in. It felt very human, in a way I couldn't articulate at the time. The patrol deployed 6 hours later. I was not part of the patrol. My job was back at the communications desk on level 2, monitoring the frequency channels and logging all signal traffic during the deployment. So what I'm about to tell you comes partly from what I saw directly, and partly from the after-action recordings that I had full access to later, and partly from what Voss herself told me 2 days after it happened, over a coffee that had gone cold before she started drinking it. The Kethoran unit took the primary routes, the wide central corridors, the high-access maintenance platforms, the places with visibility and tactical advantage. They moved with efficiency. HFY was with them, coordinating. Mara Voss and her 3-person human team went to Marker 7. Observation Post, which was, in practice, a narrow platform overlooking a junction where 2 secondary corridors met. It had good sightlines in exactly 2 directions, and a blind spot in a 3rd direction that any competent tactical analyst would have flagged immediately. Voss flagged it in her first 30 seconds there. Then she did something that was not in the briefing. She pulled up the station schematics on her portable unit, the one she'd been reading after the meeting, cross-referenced the sensor anomaly data with the maintenance logs she'd already reviewed, and confirmed what she'd said in the briefing. The Eastern Approach Corridor ran adjacent to a Verite processing conduit. That conduit had a section logged for repair 9 cycles ago. The repair had never been completed. The sensor readings that had triggered this whole patrol were consistent, almost perfectly, with harmonic resonance from that specific damaged section, at the exact frequency it would produce when Verite ore was moving through an adjacent processing channel on a particular cycle. She knew which cycle the processing would be running. She'd checked that too. She had, in other words, already solved the problem the patrol was supposed to investigate. But she was at Marker 7, Observation Post, not authorized to engage or reposition without HFY's directive. So she opened a comm channel. "Command, this is Sergeant Voss at Marker 7, requesting a brief." Threshvi's voice came back, clean, precise. "Speak." "Commander, I've confirmed the source of the sensor anomaly. It's the damaged conduit in the Eastern Maintenance Section, conduit reference 77 Alpha. The harmonic signature matches the processing cycle that's running right now. If we address the conduit directly, the anomaly resolves and no further patrol resources are needed." There was a silence on the line. I was monitoring the channel. I heard the silence. "Then, Voss, your assignment is observation. You are not an analyst." "I understand, sir. I'm reporting what I found." "You are at an observation post. Observe." She closed the channel. I don't know what she felt in that moment. She didn't tell me, and I didn't ask, because some things you know better than to ask. But I know what she did next. She sat down at the observation post. She continued to observe. She filed a written observation report through the standard reporting system, not through the command channel, not to HFY directly, but to the station's maintenance oversight log. Because the maintenance log was a separate system from the patrol command structure, and she had access to it, and filing an accurate anomaly report in the correct system was not outside her assigned parameters. The report was time-stamped, categorized correctly, and flagged at priority level 2. Then she waited. Here is what happened in the next 4 hours, and I want to tell you carefully because the sequence matters. The Kethoran patrol covered the primary routes and found nothing, because there was nothing to find. The anomaly was not in the primary routes. It was in the conduit she'd identified. 3 hours into the patrol, the damaged conduit section, 77 Alpha, just as she'd filed, experienced a pressure cascade. This is what happens when you have a damaged section running at capacity for too long. The structural integrity fails progressively, and eventually you get a blowout. Not explosive, not catastrophic, but significant enough that it triggered 3 separate emergency alerts on the station's automated systems. The alert went to maintenance. It also went, because of the Priority 2 flag Mara had filed, directly to the station's operations center with her report attached. HFY received the alert simultaneously with everyone else. He also, simultaneously, received her report, which had been filed 2 hours and 47 minutes earlier, which had identified the conduit, which had predicted, with considerable precision, exactly the failure that was now flooding Level 3's maintenance section, with ferrite particulate and shutting down approximately 1/3 of the station's secondary processing operations. I was at the communications desk when all of this happened. I saw the alert come in. I watched the cascading notifications. I watched the operations center scramble. And I watched, on the secondary monitor that fed the patrol command channel, as HFY's unit was redirected, mid-patrol in the middle of their careful tactical routes, back toward the Eastern Maintenance Section. The section that a human sergeant at an observation post had already identified, reported, and formally flagged before anyone else had gotten close to it. I saw HFY again 6 hours after the incident, in the Level 2 corridor outside the operations center. He was walking with 2 of his senior officers, moving at the deliberate pace that Kethoran officers use when they want to look like they're not in a hurry even when they are. The shoulder plates were still controlled. His face gave nothing. But I was reading temperature, and the temperature coming off HFY in that corridor was something I'd never quite cataloged in 6 months of careful observation. It wasn't anger. It wasn't embarrassment exactly. It was something more complex than either of those. Something that occurs in a person, or a being, when the world has contradicted something they believed so fundamentally that they haven't yet finished deciding what to do with the contradiction. He passed me without acknowledgement. I went back to my desk. I found Mara Voss in the station cafeteria that evening. The cafeteria on Praxis was one of the few places that had made genuine concessions to human comfort. The tables were human height, the lighting was warmer, and there was a coffee dispenser that produced something that was approximately 70% similar to actual coffee. Mara was sitting alone at a table by the far wall, both hands wrapped around a cup that had stopped steaming some time ago, reading her handheld. I asked if I could sit. She said yes without looking up. I sat. I didn't say anything for a while. She didn't seem to mind. Eventually, she put the handheld down and picked up the coffee, and looked at it like she was surprised it existed. "You filed the maintenance report before the patrol was 20 minutes old," I said. She looked up at me. Her expression was neutral but not unfriendly. "You were monitoring the channels." "I monitor all the channels. That's my job." She nodded, drank the cold coffee, made no face about it. "Why maintenance log?" I asked. "Why not push it harder through command?" She thought about this for a moment. Not like she didn't know the answer, but like she was choosing how much of the answer to give me. "Because I was right," she said finally. "And when you're right and someone doesn't want to hear it, the worst thing you can do is keep trying to make them hear it through a channel they control." I sat with that. "So you put it somewhere they couldn't ignore," I said. "I put it where it needed to go anyway," she said. "Accurate information in the right system. That's the job. Whether he reads it or not isn't my department." She picked up the handheld again. "He laughed," I said, not accusatory, just noting it, marking it as a thing that had happened. She looked up again, and this time there was something in her expression that I struggled to name. Not bitterness, not satisfaction, something more settled than either of those. "He did," she said. "Doesn't that?" "What make me angry?" She considered. "A little." For about 10 minutes, she paused. "He looked at me and decided what I was before I said anything. That's a limitation. His, not mine." She said it the way you'd say something is raining. A condition, a fact of the environment. "Doesn't bother you?" I asked. I think I wanted it to bother her more than it did, which says something about me that I'm not proud of. "Of course it bothers me," she said. "I'm not made of stone." She looked at the coffee cup. "But being bothered doesn't help me read the maintenance logs, so I read the maintenance logs." We sat in silence for a while after that. The cafeteria was mostly empty. The Kethoran didn't eat here. They had their own level. The station hum was present the way it always was. That deep mechanical sound that became the background of everything after long enough. "What happens now?" I asked. She tilted her head slightly. "With what?" "With HFY. He knows the report was yours. He knows you filed it before the cascade. He knows you told him in the briefing." She shrugged, and it was a specific kind of shrug, not dismissive, but not carrying the weight of things she couldn't control. Something changes or it doesn't. "That's it." "That's it." She picked up the handheld again. "I still have the same job tomorrow. Either he adjusts what he thinks or he doesn't. Either way, I'll read the logs." Part 2. Something changed. I don't want to oversell this, because the change was not dramatic and it didn't happen fast. The Kethoran are not a species that processes challenge quickly. HFY had been built, over 14 cycles, into a particular understanding of the hierarchy, of species, of capability, of who belonged in which position in a briefing room. 14 cycles is a long time. Those kinds of structures don't fall apart overnight. But they do bend. 3 days after the conduit incident, I was in a corridor on level 3 when I saw HFY approaching from the opposite direction, walking with that same deliberate pace. I prepared to be not acknowledged, which was standard. He stopped. Not at me, past me a few steps. Sergeant Voss had come around the junction corner. They faced each other in that corridor, and for a moment neither of them said anything, and the hum of the station filled the silence the way the station hum always filled silence on Praxis. Then HFY said in his perfect common tongue, Sergeant Voss. Not the human, Sergeant Voss. She stopped, looked at him. Commander. There was a pause that had something different in it than the pauses in the briefing room had had. This one didn't feel like prelude to humiliation. It felt more like the pause before someone says something they've been sitting with for a few days. The conduit failure, he said. Yes, sir. Your assessment was accurate. She waited, didn't say I told you so, didn't say yes it was, just waited. The cascading failure cost the station approximately 6 hours of secondary processing capacity, he said. Had your assessment been implemented at the time of the patrol briefing, the cascade would have been preventable. She was very still. That's correct. HFY's shoulder plates did something subtle. A slow, controlled movement that I had learned over months was the Kethoran equivalent of a deep breath taken before something difficult. Your analysis methodology, he said, cross-referencing sensor data with maintenance logs. This is a standard human military practice. Standard data integration, she said. Yes. Another pause. I would like to understand it, he said. If she was surprised by this, she didn't show it. She tilted her head slightly, the same tilt she'd done in the cafeteria. When would work for you? Tomorrow morning. Level 2 briefing room 0700. I'll be there, she said. He moved on down the corridor. I stood very still until he was gone. Mara Voss glanced over at me. I think she'd known I was there the whole time. Data integration, I said. Yeah, she said. He wants a lesson in data integration. She considered this, in a manner of speaking. She kept walking. The next morning I was not in the Level 2 briefing room at 0700. I had no reason to be there. It was not a general briefing, not something I was assigned to monitor. But the communications desk had a passive audio log of all public spaces, which I could access as part of my technical role, and I will admit to you now that I accessed it. What I heard was approximately 40 minutes of Mara Voss walking Commander HFY through a data integration methodology. She was not condescending. She was not performing expertise. She talked the way she always talked, direct, factual, clear, like the information was the thing and she was just the vehicle for it. She showed him how she'd cross-referenced 3 different data systems. She showed him where the maintenance logs stored historical failure patterns and how to read their timestamp metadata. She showed him how the sensor frequency matched the conduit's resonance signature at the specific ore processing cycle. She showed him how to build a predictive model from pattern data rather than reacting to sensor alerts after they'd already fired. HFY did not interrupt, did not question her authority to be telling him this. Occasionally he asked a technical clarification, precise, direct, the kind of questions that tell you someone is genuinely trying to understand rather than performing interest. At the end of 40 minutes he said, "This methodology, you apply it to all patrol planning." "To everything I can," she said. "It's not always possible. Sometimes you don't have access to the right logs. Sometimes the data's corrupted or incomplete. But when the systems are available and the time is there, yes." A pause. Then, why was this not included in the compact briefing materials on human military capabilities? "I don't know," she said, and I could hear the mild irony in it, which was the closest she came to commenting on what had happened in the briefing room 3 days ago. HFY sat with that. "I will recommend," he said slowly, "that the compact collaboration protocols include a formal data integration review prior to all joint patrol deployments." There was a silence. "That would improve outcomes," she said. "It would," he said. "I should have heard you in the briefing." This was, for a Kethoran of HFY's rank, an extraordinary thing to say. I don't think I can fully convey this to someone who hasn't spent time around them. The acknowledgement of a correctable decision, stated plainly, without elaborate framework or face-saving language. Just, I should have heard you. Mara said, "You're hearing me now." That was all she said. I want to tell you about the 2 weeks that followed, because the change that HFY underwent in those 2 weeks is the part of this story I've thought about the most. It wasn't like a conversion. It wasn't some dramatic transformation. He was still HFY, still commanding, still precise, still moving through the station with that particular certainty. He didn't suddenly become warm or effusive or personally interested in the human personnel under the collaboration clause. But the structure of things shifted. In the next joint briefing, same room, same ceiling too high for human spines, same cycling light that made the walls look alive, he introduced the human patrol team with names and ranks. Sergeant Voss, Corporal Yi, Specialist Brandt, Specialist Okonkwo, not designations, names. He allocated the human team to the approach corridor assessment role, not because he was being generous, but because, as he explained in his flat, precise way, the data integration methodology meant that a human team assigned to the corridor assessment could complete the pattern analysis in a fraction of the time a standard Kethoran patrol would require, because the human approach was optimized for exactly that kind of cross-system data work. He said it like it was tactical information, which it was. He'd looked at what the humans were good at and incorporated it into the plan the way you incorporate any capability that improves your outcome. Mara Voss at the back of the room was taking notes. She did not look triumphant. She looked like someone doing her job. I want to tell you about one more thing. About 3 weeks after the conduit incident, there was a routine equipment inspection on level 4. I happened to be there for reasons that aren't interesting, and I saw HFY pass through the inspection area, accompanied by 2 of his officers. He stopped. Mara Voss was running the inspection on one of the human patrol unit's sensor packages. She was on one knee on the floor of the corridor, tools laid out beside her, methodical. She glanced up when he stopped, then went back to the sensor package. HFY said something to her in the common tongue that I had to replay twice, because I didn't believe I'd heard it the first time. He said, "The integration protocol worked on the last patrol. We identified the secondary conduit degradation in the northern section before it reached cascade threshold." She looked up again. I saw the report. "Your format," he said. "We are using your format now." She set down her tool, looked at him directly. "I know." Another of those pauses. "At the briefing," he said, 3 weeks ago, I made an error in judgment." She was very quiet for a moment. "You did," she said, "not cruel. Not soft, just true." "It was not," he said carefully, with the weight of someone who has thought about the precise meaning of what they are saying, "based on what you had demonstrated. It was based on," he stopped. His shoulder plates moved in that slow, controlled way. "Assumptions," he said finally, "that I held before you entered the room." "Yes," she said. "That was an error." "Yes," she said again. They looked at each other. Then she said, and this is the part I've replayed most often in my mind, "Commander, you're one of the best tactical officers I've worked alongside. I mean that. Your patrol structuring is exceptional. Your response to the Cascade incident was fast and correct given the information you had. None of that changes." She picked the tool back up. "What changes is that now you know I'm worth listening to." He considered this for a long moment. Then, "Yes, now I know." He moved on. She went back to the sensor package. I stayed where I was, in that corridor on level 4, with the equipment and the tools and the too high ceiling, and I felt something that I've had trouble naming since. Not pride, exactly, because it wasn't mine to feel proud about. Not vindication, because nothing vindictive happened here. What I felt was something closer to relief. The quiet relief of watching a structure that should not have held hold anyway, and then watching it correct itself. Final passage. Mara Voss left Praxis Station about 4 months after the conduit incident. She was reassigned, somewhere in the outer systems, I heard. New deployment, new collaboration clause, new species she'd probably have to earn the right to be heard by. She came by the communications desk the morning she shipped out. She didn't make a big thing of it. She was in her kit, pack on her back, and she stopped at the desk and said thanks for the coffee, meaning the bad cafeteria coffee we'd shared a few times, and I said something forgettable, and she nodded and left. But she'd left something on the desk, a small data chip, station standard format. I ran it that evening. It was a copy of the data integration methodology, fully documented, annotated, formatted for easy transmission, with a note at the top that said, for whoever needs it next, the station systems don't change much. The approach still works. No signature. She hadn't signed it. I transferred it to the station's shared methodology library, filed it under standard operating resources. A few weeks later, a Kethoran analyst named Vethori cited it in a joint patrol report and attributed the approach to Standard Praxis Protocol. Standard Praxis Protocol. Not Sergeant Voss's protocol, not the human method, just how things were done now. I thought about that for a while. I thought about HFY in the corridor, saying now I know. About the way she'd said you're hearing me now in that briefing room, without heat, without victory, just the plain fact of it. She didn't need him to remember where it came from. She needed the method to work, and she'd made it work, and then she'd shipped out to wherever the next assignment was, and she'd probably read whatever maintenance logs were available, and file an observation report in the right system at the right time, and someone else, Kethoran or Varun or something else entirely, would probably laugh at her first. And she'd keep reading the logs. That's the thing about Mara Voss that I've been carrying around in my chest like a warm stone. She understood, in a way I think most people don't fully understand, that confidence isn't about making other people see you. It's about knowing what you know. He laughed at her confidence and what she showed him, quietly, without drama, through the correct reporting systems, over cold coffee and sensor package inspections, was not that she was better than him. She showed him that his assumptions were a limitation. And then she gave him the tools to work without them. That's the human thing, not louder, not stronger, not more armored or better plated or taller or faster or built like an engineering decision. Just we read the logs, and we leave the methodology behind.